Hello everyone and welcome to episode 101 of Velocity Kinetics. Rather bizarrely, this has been recorded even before episode 100 has finished being written. At the current point, episode 100 is on its second concept and second write, and at the moment I look like I could go to sleep, which I think I'm going to have an afternoon nap. It's been a long day. But this 101st episode, what we are looking at... So I'm just trying to see if I do some things that influencers do, or popular YouTubers do with their cameras and stuff. Maybe I might get some more views. But anyway, I've been using an app on my phone. Well, of course it'd be on my phone, otherwise it would be called an app, would it? I've been using an app called Drivescore. It's provided by a company called Clearscore. Now, Clearscore do credit scoring and credit coaching and so on and so forth. I've used Clearscore for at least 4 or 5 years now. I was trying to think the other day when I started using them, and I think it was when I lived in Middlesbrough. I just can't remember what point of when I lived in Middlesbrough. This could be when I moved in with Sarah, in which case it could be as much as 6 or 7 years ago. It could be towards the end of my time in Middlesbrough, which would be about 5 years ago. But anyway, good company. I keep using them. They're really, really good to you. Really good company. And you know, if they weren't very good, I wouldn't still be with them. But they've got an app called Drivescore. I don't know whether it's an open beta or whether only certain people have been allowed to use it. I've been using it, and yeah, we'll get into that, shall we? It's whilst that would indicate it's not all good. In many ways, it's not all good. However, I will stress before we go into it that the theory is right, the execution isn't. And with that, roll the title. So after an introduction that was recorded in the middle of August or July time, months ago, whilst in the middle of doing episode 100, things have changed. Now, the app still exists, Drivescore still exists, but at the time it was an initial by invite only, or at least the email implied by invite only. It does seem now to be open to more people, Drivescore. So what is it like using the app? I don't actually pay that much attention to it, to be honest. I check it every once in a while, so I'm half looking at it as I do this just to make sure I'm giving you all the right information, because even the overlay video I use somewhere in this is a few weeks old now. The theory behind it is it tracks how you're driving, tracks how you accelerate, how you brake, how you corner, and so on and so forth, which in turn generates your score, which will eventually be able to be passed on to insurance providers, which will in turn then help you get a better insurance. It also can help you get the right sort of insurance, give you a rough idea as to what sort of mileage you're doing. This chair is starting to sink again, even though I thought I got it sorted. Damn thing. Only I was sponsored by Pepsi Max. I could have all the chairs in the world. But in theory, it then leads to better driving practices, better pricing, and so on and so forth. However, there are a lot of pros and cons to an app like this. The plus point is it runs all the time. So it's none of this checking your app as you start in your car and arguably being a distraction before you get started. However, there have been times it's been quite battery hungry, at least on my phone. Mine's a Motorola G8 Plus. That's what my telephone is, Motorola G8 Plus. But at times it's been a bit battery hungry. Sorry, the video might start lagging now. I've just had a warning saying frame rate might be a bit funky. Joy of joys. And the chair's just sinking again. So what is there to be positive about with this app? A lot, in many ways. It shows a lot of ways you can easily build up bad habits and bad cornering habits, braking habits, and so on and so forth. But it's also quite negative in many ways. It's a good indicator as to what sort of driver you are. It's a fantastic one. And the fact it can judge everything just by being in my pocket and me not starting it up or plugging it into the car and so on and so forth. The fact you can do all that just using my phone is fantastic. Beyond fantastic in many ways. It's beyond fantastic. It's a really clever piece of kit. And the fact you can get entered into a competition to potentially win a car, which at the moment the car on offer is a Ford Puma ST, which I'm not fond of, but then again, it's a free car. Why would you argue? That's the chair going again. But why would you complain about getting a free car? You know, take what you get. Much like any average score system or any average, and those of us who worked in call centres will detest anything that's based on average, because it's so easy to make the average worse, but not always very easy to make the average better. Now, I do a lot of short journeys, so if I have a short journey where I'm suddenly having to do a lot of braking, really hard braking, and it has happened a few times, just other drivers being other drivers, basically. But there have been times where that's happened and the score's dropped massively. But then there have been times like when I've driven up to Newcastle, I've driven that whole way, no speeding, no harsh braking, no harsh turning, and so on and so forth. And the score massively recovered. There was a time with it where it seemed like every time I was in the Baleno, every time I turned the steering wheel, it seemed to go harsh cornering, harsh cornering, harsh cornering, which really ticked me off, because it just felt like every time I turned the wheel, basically. I've driven these roads hordes of times. I know what speeds I can carry through all corners. I knew how hard to turn the wheel when I've missed my ideal braking spot, and so on and so forth, or if I was fancying being a little bit more adventurous, and if I was doing it early in the morning, and so on and so forth. Unlike a black box, which will compare when you're driving, as in sort of say, recommend driving at this time to avoid traffic and so on and so forth, this app doesn't make that sort of recommendation. However, my parents had one on their car, and it said you need to do this journey at was it 7:30 or 9:30? Sort of either massively before they needed to be at work, my mum needed to be at work, or massively after she should have been at work. And it's like, do you really think an employer's going to let you change your working hours? Just go, well, it's better for my insurance. You know, it's absolutely bizarre. There are pros and cons to it. I'm unfortunately only thinking of cons with this app at the moment. Mostly because I haven't really formed an overall opinion. Overall, I'd say it's pretty good. And for being a free app and not having to pay for things, it is unbelievably good. And could replace black boxes, make that sort of thing obsolete. The trouble is, it doesn't cover all aspects of driving. So I get harsh acceleration. That messes up your miles per gallon, and so on and so forth. However, it doesn't factor in for if you've made a mistake. Like, you know, if you've accidentally lifted up the clutch too quickly, or, you know, been in the wrong gear and set off faster than you'd intended, or squeezed the throttle a bit harder if it's a car you don't know, and so on and so forth. That, it doesn't make allowances for that sort of thing. But there are times when you've got to harshly accelerate. There was one time I remember it. There was a week where it just constantly said harsh acceleration, harsh acceleration, harsh acceleration. But I was getting onto the slip road. I was coming on the slip road, or the Americans call it the on-ramp, but I was on the slip road to come onto the A14, and you need to be building up your speed and be in a good gear to move. So I had built up my speed, but in turns it says you've got to, you know, do that. But I tested it the other way, and there was a road I was driving down. It's a 60-mile-an-hour road. I got stuck behind a vehicle, and I made a point to check it afterwards because of what was going on. Now the road, I say, I was driving down just by the Crem in Risby. 60 miles an hour is what it is, a national speed limit road. Granted, realistically, you can't always do that sort of speed around there. In fact, having a bigger car now, I realised when I was flying around those roads in my Baleno, maybe I was going a little bit too fast. But I plodded along about 25, 30 miles an hour because there was this person ahead of me. They didn't break the speed limit at all, didn't even hardly bother 30 miles an hour, but I think they must have been driving with blinkers on because they continued that same speed. What was it?
No, it was about 32 they were doing. About 32 miles an hour they were doing on this stretch of 60, and then when they got into the village, they continued on. At least the rate they pulled the gap to me, they must have still been doing 32 when they got to the village. And the village is a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. But because I was going so slow, it's logged it all as good speed, no speeding, no harsh acceleration, so on and so forth. But I was driving dangerously below the speed limit. There were a couple of times if a car had come up at the speed that some of them do, I'd have been absolutely screwed. It's really good how it can tell what car you're driving, as in you just put your number plate in, it connects to whatever database, and it pulls the details of the car out, and then it does all its maths from there, which is, like I say, really good, really clever. But the speeding thing, like when you're going too slow, it doesn't pick up on that. It doesn't tell you when you're not keeping up with the flow of traffic. Everyone's guilty of that at times, whether you're just a little bit sort of I just can't be bothered with work today and dragging your feet, or whether you're just having a day where you're not with it, because you're allowed to have days where you're not with it. But it didn't pick up on that. It does pick up on mobile usage, which is interesting. I haven't seen how it's been affected with Android Auto. I imagine Android Auto has some way of overriding it. But the other thing it has on here, that's my phone is making a noise, what it has is a way to say, actually, I wasn't driving. So my problem with that is you could go through in all those journeys where if you've driven like an absolute imbecile, you could go through and mark off all these things. You could mark off all these journeys and say, oh, I wasn't driving, and boost your score to get better insurance, even though it was quite clearly you doing the driving. Now, without requiring like a fingerprint to log in to record, which is another step I don't particularly I don't think the app should go through, that does seem slightly flawed. The harsh steering thing, again, is a bit difficult, because if you live on country roads and living out in the country and things, there are some places where you've got switchbacks and things like that where you will only ever make harsh turns, and either without coming to a complete dead stop and gently rolling the car through. But then there's a point where you need the momentum to get the car. So that implies I want it to do oversteer. There comes a point where you need the momentum to get the car around the corner. It's a bit like when I'm backing the Swace around the double 90 here. I do it really slowly, but there comes a point where it's like, well, the problem's worse because I'm not going very fast. I haven't got the speed to sort of swing the front end round pretty quick and make a tighter circle or tighter turn. But it's the same principle going forwards on the country roads. And then, sometimes when you're driving down country roads, especially if they're ones you're not familiar with, suddenly the turns can come out of nowhere. Certain times of year, tractors and things will pull out of nowhere. Well, that's they can do anywhere, any time, I guess. But they can pull out from anywhere. It doesn't take that into consideration very well. Although that said, it happens every once in a while. You've got to be on a pretty crap string of luck if that happens all the time. Just have a quick look to see what else it picks up on. So this is my score as of recording on the 27th of December. 841. Don't know how well that's going to focus on it. There we are. 841 is what I'm currently on. So this is when it classes as been an event on a drive, because I don't think the ones in the video had one. And it claims there was hard cornering. Now, with where it claims there was harsh cornering, I don't know whether that's going to focus or not, but where it claims there was harsh cornering, I've got to get the car uphill. So you're sort of coming along this way, and I've got to get the car up there. Well, the road's at 60, what am I going to do? Come all the way down to 30 or something and then build the speed back up? It doesn't take fully into consideration proper economical driving. And I know I know this was the case when I did my driving test, but we're talking 6 years ago now. And I believe there's still a section on it. There used to be something called economical driving, where your car was in the right gear for the right thing and at the right time. This doesn't take into consideration whether you're driving economically or not. So for instance, with my hybrid, I've got scores and things where it tells me at the end of each journey how well my eco score was, and that's, I think it's 79, 81, something like that. My score is out of 100. I can see how much electricity I've regenerated through how I do my braking, and so on and so forth. There are lots of different options available. But this app doesn't take that into consideration. Surely that should form part, if this is going to form part of getting your insurance, ecological driving, economical driving should form part of it as well. The other thing it can't do, but even a black box can't do this. And the only way this would ever happen is when we've got, if and when we have fully automated cars that talk to each other, or at least cars that all come with black boxes as standard, and all sorts of technologies for tracking distances and so on and so forth. It doesn't tell you whether you're being an antisocial driver. So I could sit there and rev the nuts off my Baleno whilst it was sat still. The app doesn't pick anything up, which is a surprise. Well, when I had the Baleno, should I say, I could sit there and rev it. I can't sit there and rev the Swace on nothing. But it doesn't tell you that, but it also doesn't tell you, are you keeping your distances correctly? Are you changing lane correctly? Are you doing the right amount of observations? Because people seem to have this, there's no other way to put it, people have a hard-on for speeding, have a hard-on for acceleration, have a hard-on for basically driving your car a little bit more than just an average driver, shall we say. But everything else, like parking properly. The number of people, especially over Christmas, people who were taking up 2 spaces instead of 1, or swinging to 1 space so badly that it effectively eliminated the space next to it. Or people just not obeying traffic rules in the car park. But it doesn't tell you whether you're looking properly, whether when you're about to set off, do you do that? Do you look over your shoulder, make sure it's safe to go? Are you using your indicators properly at roundabouts? People don't use their indicators properly at roundabouts. They'll swing around and not use the right indicators, or they'll not use any indication at all. You know, that is a good starting point, that app. But if you're going to start marking people on bits of their driving, you've got to mark them on everything. Now, I can't say we can't do them. The one I appreciate is not going to be very easy to do is the mirror check thing, because a lot of people only flick their eyes to check the mirror. I still make an exaggerated movement to move my head, but that's because driving instructors over the years said to do it, and it's just a habit that hasn't gone. It got me through my driving test, so why would I change it? But it's really difficult to track what people are looking at and so on and so forth. And then you've got all the software things you should be looking at versus where your brain says you should be looking at, and both your brain as in, why did your brain tell you to look at that? And other times you're like, yes, good job, brain. Thank you for telling me to look at that. It's really difficult. There's no way to put it. It's really bizarre. It's really bizarre as to where to think. Is basically my only way to sum it up. Fantastic, let's say, fantastic app. Fantastic for being free. And admittedly, maybe my viewpoint might change if it cuts me lots of money out of my insurance. But it also comes back around to this whole pay per mile road user stuff that keeps coming around in the news every once in a while. Some of me feels like I don't want to be tracked on every little thing I was doing. Because if you're going to start doing that, then again, you need a proper black box or something even more invasive than a black box. And I was talking to my brother about this as well, and he agreed. You need to do this properly. You need something that's way more invasive than a black box. Is your seat in the right position? Is the steering wheel in the right position? Are your feet on the pedals in the correct position? Not what you think is the most comfortable. What is the right position? Because of course, being super reclined is probably the most comfortable position for everyone. But it's not safe to be in control of a car. And you reach all the buttons that you need to reach. You know, they've moved my seat ever so slightly when I took it in to get the bumper repaired. So I haven't quite got the buttons for the aircon and things. They're not quite as easy as they once were to sort out. I'm having to really look. But that's a distraction. So that should be picking it up, because I'm slightly distracted when you do that. Or when you want a certain song, people talk about vibing and so on and so forth, but sometimes you've got a bit of an earworm. You might want to listen to a song in particular. Trying to find it is a distraction. or radio station comes on that you don't want to listen to, that is a distraction. Where does it end? The problem is, it's like, that is a good starting point, but it proves it is not enough. And like I said, if I'm one of these people that doesn't leave space in traffic, so where I'm practically resting the front end of my car on the back end of the one in front, that's antisocial driving. You should be paying a higher premium if you're going to do that, because you've left no room for anyone to go. And if someone else was to go into the back of you, you're going to collect someone else very quickly. Like I said, where does it stop? But like I say, if you want to get a good, let me try and maybe turn this a bit more positive, because I realise that at work they label me as someone who likes to have a moan, which is like, no, that's not it at all. Not it at all. But the trade-off is, at work at least, it's a case of, I might be moaning, but guess who also has a very high strike rate of being right? Yours truly. Anywho, like I say, let's try and put some positive spin on it. If you wanted to get a good idea as to how well you're doing the main bits of driving, so actually moving the vehicle, it's very good. If you think you're speeding too much, it's a good way to track and see. I mean, I appreciate you've obviously got speedo, which is where you should be looking anyway, but I digress. But if you think you're speeding too much, even if you're checking speed all the time, you've got reassurance that you're driving right. Especially if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of passengers, you've got no one to say you're not a very good driver, or you've got no one to say you're a really good driver. It's a good way to sort of give yourself some reassurance. Likewise, the acceleration, if you think you're being a bit too boy racery, but then I guess there's probably a way to exploit it, knowing just how quickly to do 0 to 60 to not trigger it to do anything, but there we are. And the steering thing, steering one a bit contentious, but again, if you think you might have been a bit too aggressive, then if that triggers it, then but then sometimes I feel like if it's loose in the car, so where the phone can rock backwards and forwards, sometimes I feel like it picks that up more and claims it's been driven roughly, when actually no, it's just been loose on the dashboard. Well, not on the dashboard, but in the cup holder. It's been loose in the cup holder rather than in my pocket, where it's in my pocket. Wearing jeans and being on the larger side, things don't tend to move, so of course it can be clamped a lot more in place. But for a freebie, if you're let's put it this way: if you're thinking about spending out the money on the black box for your car, don't. That'll do it fantastically. If you're wanting full-blown telemetry and everything like that, then fine, splash out on the black box. Admittedly, it's not got the tracker; it won't act as a tracker if you needed one for your insurance or anything like that. But there we are. It's not really claiming to be anything along those lines. So I'd recommend downloading it, if nothing else, just to keep yourself in check. Because I've smoothed my driving down a lot because of it. I don't think it was overly rough to begin with. I'm sure Sarah would have said something if it wasn't very good. I'm sure my mum and people would have said over time that it wasn't very good either. Certainly it's very interesting going forwards. But if you're interested, go to the App Store on whatever phone you've got, Android, Apple, search for Drivescore. It's brought by the same people who do Clearscore, which is a credit scoring, not quite credit scoring, but good credit file monitoring service. And that's, again, really good service for free. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend Clearscore. And then once you've registered for Clearscore, download Drivescore and then use it. Because they're free tools, and they're tools for self-improvement, ultimately. When you delve beneath the surface, no, it's not right. I know a lot of things wrong. But on the surface, the heart's in the right place. The execution may be not quite right, but it could have been a lot worse. Everything could have been a lot worse, but what I mean is it could have been something really unusable, not very intuitive, and so on and so forth. And having used it from pretty much when they first sent me the email, it's been nothing but a pleasure to use, as in super straightforward, no head scratching, much like the Clearscore app. There's been no head scratching, no working out what on earth to do. So, like I say, go to your App Store, download it, register, download Clearscore, register, then download Drivescore, and then log in with that. Now, this video has been edited quite a long time, over 2021, but it's probably not going to be released until 2022, because I need some time, basically. And the rest of this week in 2021, it's the 27th day on the time recording, this week I've got to be in Cambridge. It means I've got to leave my house at 20 to 7 every morning. Got to get the 6:54 train into Cambridge because they removed the 7:20 train into Cambridge. But there we are. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your time off, and let's hope 2022 does not yield the same level of wankery and fuckery that 2021 and 2020 have yielded. Drive safe, look after yourselves, donate to ourselves at paypal.me/velocitykinetics, and stay tuned at the start of next year for an announcement coming soon. Thank you.